The 2021 iPad Pro has the same powerful and efficient M1 processor as the MacBook Air, or the MacBook Pro for that matter. It has a better screen, better and more cameras, better speakers, but can it replace my M1 MacBook Air? Hi, this is David of Tech for Baba, a channel I share my experiences on how technology enhances my time with kids and family as a dad. If this is your first time here, welcome. Please consider subscribing. In today's video, I'll share why this awesome new 12.9 iPad Pro still cannot replace my MacBook Air. Even though they both have the same fast M1 processor SoC inside, with the same memory and storage options, and the iPad Pro has better hardware all the way around. First, there's this gorgeous Liquid Retina XDR screen. It's basically a 12.9-inch version of Apple's 32-inch Pro Display XDR, which costs $6,000. Both displays can go up to 1600 nits and has a contrast ratio of 1,000,000 to 1. This iPad Pro display has over 10,000 mini LEDs grouped into 2,500 dimming zones. It has higher resolution than the MacBook Air display. The display on the MacBook Air isn't that bad at all. It's even a little bit bigger at 13.3 inches. Covers the same P3 white color gamut, but its peak brightness is only 400 nits. That's sufficiently bright for day-to-day tasks, but when you put them side by side, the iPad Pro is clearly brighter. At 400 nits, the MacBook Air display is far from bright enough to support HDR content. Here is the LG HDR footage. On the iPad Pro, the dark areas are so much darker, and the bright areas are so bright, like this honey is just popping out of the screen. While this may not come through too well in this YouTube video since it's not HDR, the difference is dramatic in real life. The screen on this 12.9-inch iPad Pro is so much better, and it's a touch screen too. The iPad Pro also has more and better cameras than just the one on the MacBook Air. In the back, there are two cameras with the LiDAR scanner. I don't see myself using these cameras much, but the one better front-facing camera matters as we are all doing more conference calls these days. The iPad Pro camera is 1080p and just got upgraded to have a wide 122-degree field of view. The cool new center stage feature uses machine learning along with this new wide-angle camera to focus in and keep you in the center of the frame. When another person comes into the frame, it zooms out by itself to include that person in the conversation. iPad Pro also uses this camera for Face ID, which can be more convenient than the Touch ID on the MacBook Air. I think there are pros and cons to each. It'd be nice to have both. In any case, the 720p front-facing camera on the MacBook Air is just sad, especially in 2021. iPad Pro has more speakers and mics than the MacBook Air. The iPad Pro has 4 speakers. The MacBook Air has only 2. Here's what the iPad Pro speaker sounds like. And here's what the MacBook Air speaker sounds like. Both are quite good for such thin devices, but I can hear quite a bit more depth from the iPad Pro speakers. iPad Pro also has more mics. Here is how iPad Pro's mics sound. iPad Pro has 5 studio quality mics for calls, video recording, and audio recording. Switching over to the MacBook Air's mics in 3, 2, 1. MacBook Air has a 3-mic array with directional beamforming. What do you think? Back to my normal mic. I can't tell much difference between the two. In order for the iPad Pro to replace my MacBook Air, I need to add the Magic Keyboard. I'll link my previous review of the Magic Keyboard here and in the description. The Magic Keyboard is one of the best accessories for the iPad. It types almost like the MacBook Air keyboard, which is a very good thing. The keys are also backlit. The touchpad is nice and smooth. The MacBook Air keyboard is still more sturdy. I also prefer these physical function keys, which are now back. The trackpad is much bigger and easier to use on the MacBook Air. It is very cool that the iPad Pro just floats on the Magic Keyboard though. What's even better is I can just take the iPad off the Magic Keyboard and use it as a touchscreen tablet. It's just so natural to pinch and zoom in and out of photos when I edit them, for example. And when you add another great accessory, the Apple Pencil, the iPad Pro becomes a great notebook for note-taking, brainstorming, and drawing. The iPad Pro form factor is certainly more flexible than the MacBook Air. So, the iPad Pro performance, now with the M1 chip, is on par with my MacBook Air, And the surrounding hardware on the iPad Pro, like the screen, cameras, speakers, are all better. Paired with the Magic Keyboard, touch screen, and Apple Pencil, the iPad Pro is more flexible and can do more than a MacBook Air. Why can't it replace my MacBook Air, you ask? Good question. First is the cost. The new 12.9-inch iPad Pro with 8GB of memory and 512GB of storage costs $1399 US. Adding the Magic Keyboard, which is $349, makes it $1748. If I want the full iPad experience, I'd need to pay another $129 to add the Apple Pencil. Without the Pencil, a MacBook Air with the same config costs $500 less at $1249 and can be even cheaper if we get a refurbished one. Here's one on Apple's refurbished website for just $1059. Wondering if these refurbished Macs are worth getting like I did? Check out my earlier video I'll link here and below in the description. Okay, if cost is not an issue, there is the weight. The 12.9-inch iPad Pro together with the Magic Keyboard weighs 1,351 grams, which is about 60 grams heavier than the MacBook Air. Not that much, but my bigger issue is how the weight is distributed. It's top heavy, so it's not as stable, especially when I use it on my lap. Then there's the expandability. The iPad Pro has just one port. It's been upgraded to a faster Thunderbolt 3 port, which is good. However, in my testing, it's still not as fast as the ones on the Macs for some reason. Also, when connected to a monitor, it's still mostly a mirror setup with 4:3 aspect ratio, so there are big black bars on both sides of the external monitor. I hope a software update will open this port up more on the iPad Pro soon. The Magic Keyboard does add another port, but it can only be used for charging. Nothing else. Now the MacBook Air isn't really that much better, but at least there are two fully functional Thunderbolt 3 ports. Last, but the biggest reason iPad Pro cannot replace my MacBook Air is software. I would need much better file management and multitasking on the iPad OS. The Files app is so basic, and there is minimum multitasking features like split view to see two apps side by side, and the picture-in-picture, which allows a video app to stay open on top of other apps. It sounds strange, but I actually miss Windows. Floating windows I can resize and move around for all the apps I want to have open at the same time on a proper OS desktop. Also, I need fully functional Pro apps like Final Cut Pro to be available on the iPad Pro. As much as I love the iPad Pro hardware and its flexible form factor, I can't see myself switching over to using only the iPad until these software features come to the iPad. And for all I know, it may never happen if Apple wants to keep iPads differentiated from the Macs. So if I only have the budget for one, between the 12.9-inch M1 iPad Pro and the M1 MacBook Air, I'd have to stick with my MacBook Air for now, and continue to use my cheaper and smaller iPads for media consumptions mostly. It still amazes me that such a powerful computer can fit into this very thin and sleek tablet. Too bad I just can't find better reasons to justify having this new iPad Pro. This big screen is so nice. Perhaps we'll see at the WWDC next week great improvements in the iPad OS and apps. But the MacBooks aren't just sitting around either. It's also rumored that the new MacBooks could be introduced as soon as next week, with a similar mini LED screen, more ports, even more powerful M1X or M2 processors, and hopefully and finally a high-quality front-facing camera. In addition to all my kids getting out of school, next week will be an exciting one for this geeky dad. Thanks for watching. If you find this video helpful, please help me by hitting the like button and sharing it with your friends. Are you wishing for better reasons to get the new iPad Pro like I am? I'd love to know your reasons in the comment section below. If you want to see more videos on how technology can enhance our life with kids and family, please subscribe and turn on the bell to be notified when I put out my next video. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, cherish each moment.